Turbo 360. In part 1, we set up the REST API and some basic resources. And just to recap, here are what those resources are. We have a user for just a basic user object. We also have room. And room is our vocabulary for like a category. So for example, there's going to be a room for sports where people can talk about sport, like a chat room, a room for politics, or a room for fashion, things like that. So those are rooms. Topic, which is basically the first post of a conversation. So somebody might say, post a topic like, who do you think is going to win the NBA championship? And then people can reply to those topics using reply, the reply resource. So these are the resources we currently have set up on the project from part 1. And the API is ready to go. There's probably going to be a few modifications along the way, but the basics are already in place. So we should go ahead and test that just to make sure everything still works. So if you go to your terminal and make sure you are in the root directory, run the dev server, and using our resources as an API sort of guide, we can go to localhost and hit each resource endpoint. So there's user, room, topic, and reply. So API user. Here are the current users in our backend. Room. 2 rooms, one for fashion, one for sports. One topic. Will Trump win the 2020 re-election? Whoops. And no replies. So that was probably where we left off, is replies. So good, everything works. Our back end is essentially, I wouldn't call it ready, but it's ready to start integrating into our front end, which is what we're going to do today. So in this video, we're going to download a theme, install the theme to our front end, and then hook it up to the API calls for creating these actual resources, topics, rooms, replies, things like that. So let's go ahead and do that. If you go to the video page on YouTube for this video, you will see up here a link to the course page. So click on that, and you will see the course page for this tutorial. And then if you scroll down, you'll see to download the theme for this tutorial, click here. So go ahead and do that. Download the theme. And this is the theme we're going to integrate today. So here it is. So let's go ahead and open that up and poke through it for a minute or two. And let's see what we're looking at. So unarchive the theme. Open that up. Let's start with the index.html just to see the basics of the theme. So it's an admin theme, a very simple admin theme. Nothing complicated, just jQuery, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and I think Bootstrap. But no framework, no client-side framework like React or Angular or anything like that. Yep, Bootstrap. So very conventional, very plain vanilla. So we're going to integrate this theme. Let's figure out how we're going to organize it. So let's say this will be the dashboard, and then we'll say this will be, we'll call this rooms, right? Instead of apps, we'll call it rooms. And these will be the rooms that, as the logged in user, you have subscribed to. So this will be sports, fashion, politics, etc. And then for now, that'll be it. And that'll be our home page. And then the dashboard can show maybe, let's make sure we're properly planning this through. Yeah, the dashboard can show like your some recent comments, some recent posts, just some most recent posts from the various rooms that you belong to. So basically following a Reddit style structure. So let's go ahead and start building that out. So first thing we should do is We have our theme here. Here's my source code for our project. So we want to open that up over here. And then we want to open up the theme right next to it. Let's group all the folders together. Now what we want to do is move the assets from the theme over to our project. Our project assets are stored in the public directory, and the assets right now break down to those three: CSS, images, and JavaScript. So if we open up the assets directory in the theme, we'll see those directories in addition to a few more. So what we want to do is import those assets basically one folder at a time. So if we open the CSS directory here and then the CSS directory here, we can just grab all the assets, CSS assets from the theme, and then move them over into here. That's done. And then let's go ahead and remove that. If we open up the images directory from here, the project, and then the images directory from the theme, we do the same thing. We just move all the theme images over to our project. And now that's done. So we can get rid of that. Next is JavaScript. Same idea, just move everything over. And now JavaScript is done. Our project does not have a fonts directory, so we can just move this entire directory over. That's good. I'm not sure what's in this pages one, but it looks like it's going to be important. It's a lot of jQuery modules, so let's go ahead and move those over as well. And these are SAS files for CSS pre-processing. We're not going to use it today or in this project at all, really, but we're going to move it over anyway, just so we have it. Okay, so our assets are now imported into our public directory from the theme, and that's good to go. The next thing we want to do is open the project in Sublime, which hopefully you already did. So here it is right here. And we're going to take the index mustache template, the entry point of the entire project, and remove everything. Just get rid of it. And then we're going to go back to our theme index. Open that up in Sublime, and then copy and paste the entire thing. Whoops, excuse me. Copy and paste the entire thing over into our index mustache, like so. And now we have our home page rendering the themes homepage. So if we go back to our browser and load localhost 3000, the homepage, you're going to see a big mess, right? That's because our assets are not being properly imported right now. So if you look at our asset directory structure, we have our public and then all the individual asset folders, CSS, fonts, whatever. But in the theme, all of those assets were in a dedicated folder called assets, which no longer exists in our project. So what we want to do is get rid of all of these references. So that's pretty simple. We just highlight this and we do a quick find and replace with nothing, or actually like that. And that'll get rid of this assets, prefix in the import paths. So let's go ahead and get rid of all of those. Okay, so make sure your imports look like that. Same as down here, except the plugins. We want to also do this. We want to get rid of these two dots in the plugins, because the plugins are also actually, I don't know where the plugins are. I will have to find that later. All right, we'll deal with that in a second, but let's make sure these other ones are properly taken care of. So let's go back to our home page, and everything now renders except those plugin modules. Let's see here. We might be okay without those for now, though. Those are for the graphs you saw over here. So if I go back to the theme itself, I'm going to trash the theme and then re-download it, because we removed all those asset directories and whatnot. So I'm just going to re-download it. Just unarchive that over here, take a look at it. So those plugins were for the sake of these graphs and whatnot, but they were not in the original download, so I must have forgotten to include that. So let's see here. Yeah, that would be in here. So what I'm going to do is include this folder after I upload this video. So this slight bug, do not worry about. You should not be experiencing it on your end. But what we are going to do is take those plugins and then add them to the public directory, just straight in like that. Okay, so again, this will be included in the download directory when you download, as you're watching this project. So you should not be experiencing this. And then let's go ahead and change these imports to the root directory of the public folder, because that's where I placed those. Okay, let's try that now. Okay, so now we have these graphs and charts and everything is properly imported. Everything looks the way it's supposed to look given the theme's original design. So let's go ahead and start carving this guy up into the necessary pieces for our project. So let's go ahead and do that. So first thing we want to do is take this head tag and place it inside the head partial so that we can just reuse this head tag on multiple pages. So that'll take care of that. And then let's do the same with okay, still looks good. Let's do the same with the JavaScript imports. So let's create a new partial for those JavaScript imports. So I'm going to C to the views directory, partials directory, and create an imports mustache partial. And we're going to take these JS imports and move them over to the imports partial. Okay, and that looks good. Let's see here. Let's do the same with this guy on top. It's probably something like nav or something like that. So let's go all the way on top. Left sidebar start. So let's find the end tag of that, which is right here. Left sidebar end, and then top bar. Top bar. So we'll call it the same thing. So let's go to our views, partials, and let's create a top bar mustache partial for that guy. And let's find all that and do the same thing. Okay, and then here is our top bar partial. So now if I reload the page. Everything should look the same, so everything looks the same here. Just make sure there are no console errors. Everything is clean. So far, we're just moving pieces around, nothing too complicated. And let's do the sidebar as well, just for good measure. So go back to our views directory, our partials directory. Let's create a sidebar mustache. And let's grab that. All right, let's see how that looks. Okay, good. So everything looks the same, which is what we're going for. And we just move some pieces around, so that's good. Into partials, which is better architecture. Our main entry page now is much fewer lines because pieces were organized into their separate partials and whatnot, making it easier to reproduce pages. So that's good. So now what we want to do next is do some basic optimization. Let's start with the head tag. We want to use Gulp to, let's see here. If we open up the head partial, you will see the bootstrap, min.css, icons, metis menu, and style.css. So all of these should be concatenated and sort of merged into one big file and minified to optimize the delivery so that you're not making 4 requests to the server for 4 separate files when you can bring that down to 1. That's a basic optimization that should be done in your web-based project. So we're going to do that here. So we're going to compile that into one main CSS style sheet, probably called exactly that, main.style, main.css. And then we're going to deliver that instead. So that's going to be done through Gulp. So what we want to do is import a handful of Gulp modules. So I don't have these memorized, so let's go ahead and find another project where I do the same thing. Let's see. I am going to use the restaurant tutorial. That one came out pretty good. Okay, so we're going to download and install these Gulp modules. So it's going to be Gulp, Gulp, Auto, Prefixer, Gulp, Concat, Gulp, Minify, CSS, Gulp, Rename, Gulp, Uglify. So here are the modules we're going to download, the Gulp modules, which will carry out those tasks which I described a few minutes ago. So head over to your terminal and do npm i-d for development. So we're not going to deploy these modules, we're just going to use them for development purposes, and you can just paste them all in like this and it'll download all of those in sequence. Okay, so now we have our necessary gulp modules. Let's go ahead into the package JSON, make sure you see these, otherwise it didn't work. And then we also need what's called a gulp file, so touch gulp file.js in the root directory of the project where we can define those tasks. So what we're going to do, so now we have an empty gulp file. So in here, this is basically a JavaScript config object. We need to import those modules that we just downloaded. So here are the imports. So go ahead and do the same thing. What I'm going to do for the sake of convenience for this project, because Gulp isn't really, we don't want to spend hours on Gulp, is I'm going to create a gist. So GitHub gist. And I'm going to use the Gulp file from the restaurant tutorial I did about a month ago and just make a gist out of that. And I'll make it a public gist. And here it is right here. And I will add this link to the YouTube video as well as the page for this. So I'll add another link right here where you can just download the gist file, and then you can just use that as your base foundation for this gulp file right here. So you can just copy and paste that entire thing. And we're going to change basically all of it because this is for a different project. But you can use this as a skeleton gulp file to configure your gulp configuration tasks. So here is the public gist I just created for that purpose. So go ahead and grab that from, again, the YouTube video here. I'll put it in after I upload this video, or on the course page as well. So either or, it should be good to go. So hopefully that worked on your end. Now what we need to do is head over to the head.mustache and grab the CSS files. There's 4 of them. And then we need to go to the gulp task called CSS main, which is basically doing the job of concatenating and minifying the CSS files. And then we're going to paste those in right here. And create 4 placeholders, 2, 3, 4, for each one of those. And then we just import them. Okay, so what this CSS main task will do is it'll go through each one of these 4 CSS files. It'll minify them, which is basically stripping out all the spaces and extra returns and whatnot. I'm not really sure what this does, so just don't worry about it. It'll concatenate all 4 of them into a new file called style.main.css and then place the results into a dist directory in the public folder, which right now doesn't exist. So what we want to do is head over to our terminal and test it. Right, so if we go to our root directory and we do gulp space CSS main for the name of the task, if I run that, on the left side I should see a dist directory pop up right there. And that is at the end of that task. So if I open this up, you'll see a CSS style.min.css based on this guy right there. And if I open that up, you'll see a huge mess of CSS, just a big jumble of CSS classes. And this is all 4 of our CSS styles just sort of mashed together. So that's done. So now what we can do is we can take this, and instead of importing all 4, we can do dist css style.min.css. So if I get rid of this altogether, just completely get rid of the CSS. Now there are no CSS imports. So if I reload the page, obviously it looks like, like this. If I import the minified version, the compiled version, I'm right back to where I was before. So everything looks good, just like it did before, except notice these icons are missing, right? And if you open the console log and check out the actual console as you run this page, you'll see it's looking for a fonts directory. So these icons are usually stored in the fonts directory. So we want to take care of that right now. And so here, where'd you go? Where's it? Here it is. Okay, you may recall in the theme there was a dedicated fonts directory which needs to be copied over into the dist folder because the CSS is now referencing the dist folder. So what we want to do is head over to the Gulp file, and you see there's a copy fonts task right here. So I'm just going to take the copy fonts task and then paste it right here. And if you look at what it does, it takes the fonts directory from the public folder right here, and it just copies it over to the fonts directory in the dist, and that's it. So we want to run copy fonts. So gulp copy fonts like that. So here it should now take care of that missing fonts directory issue. And there it is. So if I run the dev server, here we go. All the fonts are now there. So what we want to do is create a single task that encapsulates both of those, the CSS concatenation, minification, and the fonts copying task. So what we want to do is create another task down here. I'm just going to copy that and paste it over here called style, which will do the copy CSS main and the copy fonts. Don't worry about this vendor one. In fact, we're just going to get rid of that completely. And by creating another task like this called style, it'll run both of these, copy fonts and main, in sequence. So now what we can do is I'm going to get rid of this dist directory, just right click on this and just delete the whole thing. And now I'm going to run one task called style, which is basically the combination of those other two tasks in sequence. So you can see it's copy CSS main and copy fonts. And then if I open this up, we have our CSS and our fonts. So they were both successfully executed from this one task right here. So that is now done. So if I run the dev server, we are back in business. And then if I open up the source, you will see that we're importing just this one guy instead of those previous 4 CSS imports, which is a much better way to handle this. So that is successfully done. If I go back to the source, scroll to the bottom, we now need to do the same thing with these guys. All right, so we need to basically create the same effect. We need to minify, concatenate, and get all these imports down to 1, because right now this is too many. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So there are 18 imports, which means there are 18 individual requests to the server for each one of these assets. So that's no good. So we want to get that down to 1. We want to go from 18 to 1. That's the goal. So I'm just going to check something real quick. Just to make sure I didn't forget something. So here's the original theme. And then if I do, let's see here. Okay, here is the theme page source for a different page, the calendar page, which is right here. Right, I just randomly picked another page. What I'm looking for are commonalities and differences. So for example, here where it says scripts, right, these scripts are pertinent only to that page. If I go to the index page, which is the one we're using right now, right? Let's look for the commonalities. So all this jQuery stuff is on the index imports as well as the calendar import. So that's a definite that we need to bundle. And then the jQuery UI, we should probably throw in there as well. I don't really see how that could hurt. Let's see. Moment, calendar, jQuery calendar. And the index page doesn't have any of those. It has a dashboard in it, right? Which is probably initializing these chart things. And jQuery knob. Okay, so what we're going to need, and then here's the app.js, jQuery core and jQuery app.js. That's in both of them. Okay, so what we're going to need is the following. We're definitely going to need to do this, right? These. And then these are also on both pages. So what we're going to need are basically 3 build scripts for JavaScript. The main one, we're going to call this vendor. And then there's an app one, we're just going to call that app.js. And then these are page specific. So we're going to have different build scripts for different pages. So there's going to be a home page or whatever. So let's go ahead and get that started. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. So we have a vendor script already set up here. Let's get rid of all of these. Because again, these are from a different project, so we don't want to worry about that. Let's comment this out for now. All right, let's set up the vendor script. So if we go to the index mustache, the imports, excuse me, this pile of JavaScripts is being imported into every page of the project. So that's going to be our vendor. So we want to copy those and then get those in here. One, two, three, four, five, six. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let's start throwing these guys in. La-di-da. All right, almost done. Okay, so this will concatenate and minify all of 6 of these jQuery modules into a vendor.min.js in the public JS dist directory. So let's go ahead and build that guy. So it's JS vendor. So we do go to the terminal, turn off the server, and then we do gulp JS vendor, and then take a look at the dist file, dist directory. And there it is right there. So we have vendor.min.js. So now what we can do is go to our imports and get rid of all of these. And we do dist vendor.min.js. And that should take care of those imports. So let's test it out. All right, everything looks good. Take a look at the source, and here it is. And if we open that up, we'll see a big pile of JavaScript, minified, concatenated, etc., etc. Okay, we want to create a separate one for this right here. Call that app.js. Whoops, excuse me. So we're going to create another task called JS app. Going to get rid of these guys. And don't forget to change the name here. So concat to app.min.js, and then otherwise it'll overwrite the previous build result. Okay, so it's a very subtle thing you don't want to forget. And then head over to our imports, and let's get those 2. Luckily it's only 2, so it should be pretty easy. And then let's go ahead and do the same thing. JS, jQuery core, jQuery app. Alrighty. Turn off the server. Let's try that guy and see how it looks. So Gulp JS app. Of course, spell it right this time. There it is right there. So that's an easy one. Just app.min.js. All right, so now everything here is page specific. So like those imports are necessary for the dashboard page as opposed to the calendar page, as opposed to some other page on this theme, right? So we want to create another one. JS dashboard. We'll call it page dashboard. And then what we'll do is the same thing. We'll just grab these guys. Don't forget to do that dashboard. And then instead of public dist JS, I'm going to do public dist pages JS. Excuse me, dashboard JS. So I'm going to have dist pages dashboard JS just to create better organization on the dist directory. So you want to be organized about how you separate your assets. So let's see here, plugins. There is a plugins directory. Public plugins. Excuse me, I'm having a bit of a brain fart here, so. All right, let's do that. Okay, let's get rid of all of these. Alrighty, so we have public dist and then pages dashboard. All right, let's try it out. So JS page dashboard, and then we do gulp. Open up the dist directory. pages, dashboard.js, dashboard.min.js, very good. And then let's go ahead and dist pages dashboard JS dashboard.min.js, and hopefully that doesn't break any path imports, but we will find out in a second or two. Turbo dev server. Okay, and let's take a look at the source. Very nice. And then we have, let's see here. Since these are page specific, this guy right here, I'm going to take these two. Actually, it's not a big deal. Let's just do this instead. Dashboard imports, page imports. Let's copy these guys and then head over to the home page. And instead of using imports, let's go ahead and just import these one at a time like that, because there's only 3 now, and that's nice. So, you know, it's not that bad. This is page specific. Vendor, all pages import this. Okay, so we can go ahead and get rid of the imports partial, because it turns out it's not really that much as it is. So we're good on this. Now we only have these 3 imports over here. The head tag only has these 2. It's very nice. It's very lean. Everything is very lean. It's sort of tightened up. Let's see here. What we're going to do now is create a single task that will do all of this, right? So that's going to be the build task. So we want to create a single task called Gulp.js, which is going to do the JS vendor, JS app, and JS page dashboard. So this one task will do all 3, just like we did with the style task. Same idea. So now we do, going to turn this off, and we have 2 sort of encapsulating tasks, JS and style. So I'm going to create one more task in the bottom. Well, they're already created, called prod and default. So the prod and the default basically they're the same for now, but they do the style and the task in sequence. So basically I'm going to get rid of this entire dist directory. Delete. And then we're going to do gulp prod for production. And now it's running all the tasks. And now here's the dist directory. If you look at it, all those things we did earlier are being properly built, compiled, and placed in the proper directories that we specified. So we're going to test it by running the dev server. And make sure everything still looks good, which it does. All the JavaScripts are running. No console errors. This is a clean implementation so far, so very nice. And then let's keep moving here. So now we want to run these tasks not directly through Gulp. We want to run them as scripts in the npm ecosystem, so the package.json. So we open a package.json, and we have some build scripts, right? So we want to do a build script And I'm going to take this from the restaurant tutorial as well, just because. So we want to run a build like that. Just go ahead and copy this. And then we also have a clean script, which is going to remove the dist directory every time we run the build. So it runs the clean. It sets the node environment to production, which for now we actually don't really need, but it's not a bad idea just to keep that there. And then gulp prod. Now, if you're running on a Windows machine, actually, let's just go ahead and take care of that right now. So I'm going to import cross env, which basically runs certain scripts on both Windows and Mac environments, or Linux style environments. I'm going to use that instead. So here, and then we're also going to use npm id rimref. I think rimref is already in there. Yep. Okay. So instead of this is a sort of a Mac or a Linux command, we can just use rimref, which is basically doing both for Windows and PC. So if I can get rid of that. If I do npm run clean, it'll get rid of the dist directory, and that's successful. And then here I want to do cross env, and that will run take care of this for both Windows and Mac. So we can do npm run build now, and it'll replace the dist directory with the updated a whole new build. Right? Just make sure you imported those other modules I said a moment ago. So we have cross env and rimref, which will take care of the cross-environment issue. So normally I wouldn't do this in my projects because I have a Mac, so I build these scripts for Mac only, but a lot of people who watch my videos also have Windows, and I get emails pretty much every day saying, how do you do this on Windows? Well, this is how you do it on Windows. So now what we want to do is we do npm run build, which will run the clean and the build. So that goes away after about 5 seconds. Now we're back in business here with a totally fresh build using the scripts in our gulp tasks. Always test the dev server. And excuse me, everything is back in working order. This is fantastic. So now we go to the next thing I'm going to do is deploy this, because obviously we want to make sure it works on staging, right? So I'm going to throw this up to the staging environment. I'll pause this part so you guys don't have to deal with it. All right, my deployment just finished up. If yours is done too, you should see this output right here giving you a staging link. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that into the browser. Make sure it looks the same on live or staging as it does on local, which it does. Now, one of the main reasons I did this, other than just to make sure it works, is to look at the source code and take a look at the imports, right? So we have the dist, which is what we had before, and these imports down here, and everything worked great. More importantly, when you click on these, you'll see that it directs to a CDN import. Well, then in actuality, we want to import the CDN directly in our project as well. Now here's why. And this is important to understand from an architectural standpoint. By referencing it like this, you're referencing the server, and the server may or may not contain the assets in a real environment. But really, you don't want your static assets to come directly from the server anyway. You don't want that. You want them to come from a CDN, which is more optimal way of delivering static assets. So this way of importing a static asset shouldn't happen at all. It should just go right to here directly. So I'm going to take that. Now, the reason I did it on here on staging is to show you that Turbo automatically places your static assets behind a CDN. It does that for you as a service of Turbo. So normally what you'd have to do if you're using, say, EC2 or even Heroku or DigitalOcean is you'd have to set up the CDN yourself and then place the assets behind the CDN yourself, which is not exactly easy for a beginner. And what I find is a lot of beginners just don't even do that, period. They just put all the static assets on the server directly, which is sort of a beginner move, right? You have to explain the CDN principles to a beginner, and these are things that, you know, if you're in a production environment, you know, doing real development work, you don't have time to explain all these things to beginners. So really what you want to do is get to the CDN as soon as possible. So here, I'm going to go back to the head tag and import the style.min.css right here directly from the CDN. You see that? And while we're here, we may as well do that for these other imports as well. So we have the images favicon. So remember, I said all static assets, right? So if we click on this, you'll see the CDN as well. So, and again, Turbo just does this for you. It parks it behind the global CDN for your convenience. And then we also have this modernizer.min.js. So here we grab that in full URL, and then we can just place it right there. So now these are referencing the direct CDN imports. So we can do turbo dev server. Right, and then run the local host. And everything still looks great, looks the same. Okay, keep in mind I'm back on localhost. So if I go here, you'll see I'm now referencing the CDN. Very important distinction. So what we want to do now is do the same thing for the footer imports. So down here. So if I go to the staging link again, which is right here, I basically carry out the same thing. So here I go to the source, go down here, we have vendor.min.js. Here is the CDN version of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and then we have dashboard.min.js. Dashboard.min.js. And then app.min.js. And again, notice how these are all minified, concatenated, all that good stuff. So we're really optimizing the delivery of this static theme. Now we have this CDN import, you know, quite a few times. Really, that's poor form. So we want to grab the CDN up to here, right there, and store that in the env. Turbo gives you a CDN key right there. And that's going to be our CDN link. So what we want to do now is when we go to the routes that serves this page, so that would be the index route right here. This is the route we're working on. So what we want to do is grab const, let's say config. Going to create a config object. And CDN equals process.env. And then grab the CDN from the env variables. And then we can pass the config in like that. And then in here, in the head tag, we can then do CDN like that, because we're passing it in as a CDN key in the config data object. And this would be considered much better, much cleaner code. And then we want to do the same thing with these imports. And then let's run the dev server. Run localhost. And on the dev server, we now have the CDNs being imported, the CDN assets being imported by virtue of this environment variable right here, which is being passed in through the route right here. And that's pretty much as far as I'm going to go with this theme implementation. That's as far as I normally go. But now it's properly configured, imported, optimized. It's really tightened up. I'm going to do one last deploy just to make sure everything works on staging as well. And just like before, I'll spare you the actual deployment process. All right, deployment is done. Takes about 1 to 2 minutes. It'll give you a staging URL. It's the same one, so you can just save it from before. And then we run it again and make sure everything still works on staging, which it does. And then the assets are being properly imported. Don't worry about these, X2F. That's just URL encoding for backslashes. If you click on it, it'll still render the actual CDN asset. And that's it. And then if you go to your actual Turbo dashboard for the project, so this is the project I'm running right now. If you go down to configuration, page configuration, you'll see down here in the global variables, these are your env variables. And you may have noticed the Turbo CDN automatically updates right here. That's the CDN link by virtue of these envs right here. So basically what happens on deployment is that whatever envs you have here locally is what gets deployed onto here as well, so that you can things sync up. Now you can change it after the fact, that's fine. If I want to change this later on after deployment, that's perfectly fine. The only thing that doesn't change, by the way, is the environment, Turbo env. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to make one last small adjustment. This may seem nitpicky, but if the process turbo env equals dev, so on dev, we want to have it linked to the CDN only on staging, but on dev we want it to link to local. Here's why. So let me just make sure this even works. The turbo dev server. So I go back to the home localhost homepage. Everything still works, looks good. If I run the source, see it's back to local. Now the reason I did that is because if you want to make changes to the local CSS, JavaScript, whatever, and you don't deploy, those changes won't take effect locally. It could be very confusing. So you want to only have the CDN linked on staging. So I'm going to create a const like so, and then do it like that. And that'll be the last change I make. That way we can be confident that any changes we do locally will be reflected immediately locally, and then when we deploy, this will defer to the CDN but by then the local changes will be on staging and the CDN will propagate anyway, so it'll be synced up entirely. So we're good to go there, and that's why this is how you want to maximize the CDN benefit of Turbo. So, all right, so that was it. That's a typical theme integration. Pretty straightforward. You want to get in the habit of doing this and optimizing your asset delivery and getting used to carving things up into partials and properly placing your assets behind a CDN. These are all important things that are often overlooked by sort of beginner or junior developers. And it's one of those things that people lose time on, right? So a lot of junior developers I've trained in the past, I have to explain all these things and show them how to do all this, and it becomes one of those things where it's like, is it really worth it? Like if I'm going to hire a junior dev at $25 an hour or something like that, well, several of those hours are going to be me explaining these things to that junior dev, so no work is getting done. So it's really appealing if you already have these skills under your belt as a junior dev, because it's a lot less I have to explain, right? So believe me, trust me, a lot of senior developers and a lot of dev shops, they have this same mindset. Like, is it going to be worth it training this individual, paying this individual while training this individual on all these small things that, it'd be a lot better if they already had those skills coming in. And this what I explained in this video, it falls under that category of, it's not really helping my company right now to explain all these things to the junior dev while paying him or her several hours for this process. So if you as a developer already have these skills under your belt and can articulate them and show them in a GitHub repo, like for example, one of the things I always look at when I get emails and GitHub repos asking for junior dev work is, does this person understand the basics of optimizing asset delivery? Because if not, these are things I'm going to have to explain, and because I'm not going to let that go into my production environment, right? So these are the things that a real senior dev looks for. So make sure you have those those little things taken care of, and it'll make you much more appealing when you're sending your resume out and whatnot. So